Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I look at the Fleer cards and stickers and patches of the 1970s, basically from the late 60s into the 1980s. And there is a surprisingly large amount that they were doing here because Fleer really wanted to be one of the baseball card companies, and they actually already were because they predated Topps and Bowman. Fleer was the company that made Gaudi cards, and setting aside Bazooka, both Bowman and Topps had gotten into baseball cards after Gaudi had already finished. But Fleer never really viewed baseball cards as a long-term affair. They tried it for a while, but it didn't last for long enough because, well, they couldn't quite find that rhythm. But that was something that Bowman was able to figure out. And Bowman created the foundation for modern cards. And then Topps took that over, quite literally, and created a market where by the end of the 1950s, Fleer realized there was a good opportunity to make cards, and they wanted to now be a part of it again. Only now they had the daunting challenge of Topps standing at the gateway saying, no, you're not allowed to. And Fleer tried. A for effort, they tried to make cards in 1959 with Ted Williams cards, and then 60 and 61 they were trying to make cards with legendary players, and then in 1963 they tried to really push the envelope and find if there was some way they could slide past Topps with modern players, only to be told very clearly, no, Topps has much better lawyers than you do. And so, just like that, Fleer learned that, they're just not making modern cards of baseball players. And cards of classic players, legends from the past, just didn't have the ability to really hold up. So, by the end of 1963, Fleer knew that if they were going to make cards, they had to just stick to trading cards. Not baseball cards, just trading cards in general. And they did that for quite a few years. Now, in 1966, they did make a baseball game. This was not Major League Baseball oriented. It was about baseball, and so it was a fun game that kids could play. A normal size card with a blank card back, everything on the front, pretty basic. Not really much more to say about it. It's just kind of something that they put out there, and then they were able to move on. But by 1968, they had a really great opportunity, which is that Topps, because they had a legal right to corner the market on all baseball players, they had that in place, and they were a cheap crap company. So they're the only company that can make baseball cards of baseball players, so why bother to pay the Major League Baseball licensing fees? They didn't need to because they had the players. And that was just money that was wasted, so they never did, which meant that it was sitting around waiting for Fleer to be able to pick up and actually utilize. So starting in 1968, Fleer got back into cards in a different way because they shifted over to not so much about the cards as much as about baseball patches. That was really the key to what Fleer was selling. So these are not stickers, they're patches, which means you can attach them to clothes. You can sew them on if you want to. They don't work the same way as stickers, but it gives you the ability to really personalize with really nice logos and team names. And that was something that sold surprisingly well for quite a few years. Now, the 1968 versions are really tall. They're almost the height of a tall boy. And they have three different patches of the team where they have a big logo, then they also have a fancy team name, and then they have a simple team name on a plaque. So those three, which aren't necessarily stacked, but they're all three on each one of these backing cards, this was what for the main part of what kids were collecting. But then it wasn't the only thing, because there was also a card that came along with it, which was about one of the different baseball teams. This had a logo on it and had a little bit about the team. Again, blank back, nothing. They didn't bother to do anything on the back, just straightforward on the front. And as you can see, there's not a lot to this. It's really quite simple. Now, in 1969, they made a change where the cards got a little bit smaller. So they're much smaller than a tall boy, still not quite approaching a normal size card, still more on the tall side. they once again did cards of different teams, again blank backs, but on the front, instead of having a write-up or instead of having stats about the team, instead they did a quiz. So the cards were different and a new opportunity to collect these cards. But they also wanted to do something a little bit more, so they also had stadium cards, which were not one per stadium. So it was not, there's also no numbers for any of these. So you couldn't really collect them. They were just, well, more cards. Basically, you can see that Fleer was still trying to figure out what to do with the ability to make cards, because they didn't want to push the envelope too much with Topps and end up with another lawsuit. So they were just trying to figure out, what can we do that's just general baseball? Interesting ideas. But again, this is really about the patches. And in starting in 1969, they changed the patches. So instead of one big patch, they have 3 different options, which gives more collectability for collectors, where they have 3 patches for each team. The first one is a white bordered card, basically, with patches that are a big square with the team logo in it, and then down below they have the team name. And then the second one is a solid color patch card, and then they have a curved city name, and then they also have a circular patch for the logo. The third one, however, is a smaller pennant. So they were having fun with all this. These are all a little bit smaller than a normal card, especially the pennant, much smaller than that. But that gave more variety for kids to be able to really push and try to collect all of these. There are some variations. I'm not going to get into any of that. But this model they would continue to use well into the 1970s. So this was basically standard moving forward. Before I move on to 1970, I do need to note there's one other thing they did in 1969, which is that they did plaques. And these plaques are plastic, and they're in relief. So they have a baseball cap with the team logo, and they have a baseball, and they have the name of the team, and all of this is on this flimsy plastic, it's kind of like a clamshell that you can't see through. Interesting idea, really interesting idea, but not something that was probably not something too successful, and not something that they ever bothered to continue. In fact, they wouldn't do anything this elaborate until Fleer Collectibles in the new millennium. So it would be quite a ways away, but they did at least do this, which is kind of fun. All right, now let's head into the 1970s. In 1970, they decided to move away from these big oversized cards and go with a normal size card with art from a cartoonist or a cartoon-like artist by the name of R.G. Laughlin. Now, Laughlin had already been making this kind of cartoon art, because in 1968 he made a whole set of different pictures that he drew for every single World Series up until that point. These were black and white, and they were sent out, sold as a set from his home. Well, Fleer realized they could take advantage of this, and so they teamed up with him to allow him to do color versions of each one of these cards that would be released in Fleer packs. And for the occasion, he added 2 new World Series, because 1968 and 69, he was able to include them in the 1970 packs. But he also had the ability to colorize them and change some of the art for the occasion. So that means that these cards are very different from the 1968 original cards that he created. The cards, the big thing to note about these cards is that they have a baseball with the date of the World Series in it. That's important, because in 1971 he was commissioned to do a whole new set of the exact same thing. These cards have a box where the date is at, which has a big MLB logo, to really show off the fact that they were paying the league for the right to show the logo. But you might notice something about this particular card, which is that this is a 1971 card featuring the 1974 World Series. If that seems weird to you, it's probably just because Fleer and Laughlin were really brilliant and knew what the next couple of World Series were going to turn out like. Or you could go with the boring answer, which is that in 1978, this card set was re-released with the addition of the 1971 through 1977 World Series, which means that only those newer World Series are not double printed, the rest are. I'm not going to go into the differences between them because I want to look at Laughlin as an independent story, because there are a lot of other Laughlin cards outside of what we've talked about here in Fleer. This is one of those cases, and I just don't want to get to that point. So do understand that the box theme, these cards were released in the 1971 release of Fleer. All right, so for 1972, it was time to make a change away from that. They'd done 2 years of team cards, 2 years of World Series. Now it's time to get really kind of fun and create a unique kind of interest, almost a Guinness Book of World Records type of an interest, where they made their baseball's greatest feats cards. These again are Laughlin. These are taller, so this is like the 1969 size cards, not the 68s. And it gives a little bit more real estate for him to play around with art for the different special achievements that happen in baseball through the years. We get to see old players drawn in a cartoon-like fashion. Yeah, really fun set. Now, also in 1972, they did quiz cards. And these baseball quiz cards are not numbered. These go back to the blank backs. So only the Laughlin cards have the front and the back. In this case, there's no back. And there is not so much a set. I mean, there is a set, but they didn't bother to approach it like a set. It's just fun quiz cards they tried for a year and did not repeat for a second year. All right, so that's 1972. In 1973, they did Baseball's Wildest Days and Plays. Now we're getting into some really fun, quirky, and interesting stories about baseball. The cards are, once again, oversized cards, the same size as the previous year, front and back. It has both sides of that. And, well, it was basically just a new idea that came in conjunction. But Fleer did do one thing outside of this that's well worth noting, which is that they made big signs. Now in football, they'd already done big signs and they were doing it again. In baseball, they only did big signs 1 year. These are really big sized cards of cardboard, blank backed on the back, a big team logo on the front, and there is a nail hole up at the top that's designed into the cards, or into these big signs, and that gave you the ability to hang it up wherever you wanted to hang it up, which was the whole point of them. Again, they didn't bother to do a second year, so for baseball, it didn't appear to be very successful. All right, so then they did, for 1974, Baseball Firsts. Basically a continuation, another card set that looks at Laughlin art of baseball achievements through the years, just kind of churning out. But there would be a bit of a change heading into 1975, and as we do this, I do want to note that Fleer made an agreement with MLBPA, or not MLBPA, NFL, the Major League Baseball licensing in 1968, and that is what you get to see on these cards when they do have a date. So understand they are spread out in terms of their release, but anytime you do see a date, it tends to be all 1968, so just don't get too confused by that. And the reason I wanted to mention that is because in 1975, they went with a Fleer card. This was kind of like a nod to the 60 and 61 set because it was Baseball Pioneers, individual cards of legendary baseball players throughout the early years of the league. These cards are incredibly intricately designed for 1975, by all means. And I do say 1975 because there is a date on the back that says 1974, but a copyright date does not have to align with when the cards were actually released. So it's a 75 set as we understand it, and the cards are anything but being like a Topps card. They are a bit bigger, so they're continuing with that bigger size. The design is intricate rather than simplistic and bold. And on top of that, these cards are super thin. And I mean, we're talking thin, like thinner than what we would see from Fleer in the 1980s. Really, really thin. And these cards are actually individually numbered on the back, so they do get put together as a complete set. But unlike football, where they did 2 years, in this case, they only did 1. And that segues us into 1977. So 1977, we had now shifted away from cloth patches to stickers. And the sticker set allowed for a slightly bigger card, or bigger reason for pursuit. So every single team had two different types of stickers. One of them was a continuation of the box logo with the team name down below. Now you could get these in sticker forms, but the other version is a big team logo that dominates the entire card. But this is where it gets interesting because they have actually three different versions. Every one of these logos comes with comes as a white border. It also comes with an off-white border, and it comes with a color. Now there are different colors based upon the team, but every team has only one color that the card may show up in. But they also did something else in 1977, which is that for teams that were successful in the World Series, as well as the team that was not successful in the World Series, they made special cards that were dedicated to the achievement. And I must note that these are all blank backed. That's really important because in 1978, they repeated the whole thing. There are no cards in the 77 set or the 78 set. It's all the same, although the World Series champs are going to change if another team wins the World Series. But other than that, all of the colors of the borders, that all matches. The only difference in 1978 is that on the back, they used the back of the card for a puzzle, which makes perfect sense because, look, brace yourself, this is going to shock you. A sticker is supposed to be taken off of the backing and put on something else, which means that the backing is useless and can be thrown away. But Fleer realized that they could actually repurpose that for some sort of a card, which is kind of funny because that's kind of the way that cards started in the 18th century. So what we got was a puzzle of a picture of the World Series, and not a small puzzle, 60 pieces. It's a huge puzzle to put together. The border is really, really complex. It's a white outer border with a red inner border with a white inner border with with a blue frame or mat inside of all that. It's a big border, but that's because there's so many of these tiles. It's a big final image. Too big, really. And the picture is really kind of fuzzy too. It's not the best that we would ever see so that was the 1978 version. In 1979, the card fronts were all the same, or the stickers were all the same on the front, and then on the back, the puzzle looked different, especially with the border, which started off with a red outer border and then a white inner border and then a blue inner mat beyond that. Basically, they got rid of the outer white and then shrunk everything down, which worked perfectly fine, and it made these puzzles a lot easier. The puzzles are actually pretty easy to tell which particular year the puzzle came from because the front doesn't help at all. But at any rate, that is what we ended up with in 1979. Now when we get to 1980, we get a big change because now they get away from the puzzles and, well, they get away from basically everything, and they shift over to a design that we saw in basketball, which is that every single team has two different types of logos, or two different types of cards, and one of those is actually not something that we did see in basketball because it is a hat. Team logo with the hat, and then down below is the team name. And these cards are, you can tell, almost kind of cartoony in how they look, covered with color. But they have another version where they have a black box at the top with the team stats, basic stats, from the previous year. So 1980, the first year they did this, have 1979 stats on them. The lower portion is a big color space with the team logo inside of it. I'll be getting back to that in a minute, but I want to note that on the back of these 1980 cards are actually the 1971 year Laughlin cards, the ones with the boxy number for the year. And in 1981, they followed the exact same model. They did all the same sticker fronts, and then on the back, they actually have the 1970 art, the one with the baseball. So originally we would see in 1970 with baseball, 1971 with the box for the team or for the year, and then 1980 had the box, and 1981 was the one that had the baseball logo on the backs. So they were repurposing the Laughlin art from years before to back these stickers. And then we get to 1982, and well, they continued the same model. And I want to take this moment to show that you can see what the team colors look like for the black box versions. Every single team has, I believe, just two. Every team does have a green sticker front where they have an arc at the top, which is the outfield, and then the rest of it is a diamond, and that is the sticker, the whole sticker. So the whole point is to pull the whole thing off, and then you have a baseball diamond with a logo in the middle sticker. Whereas for the other color, you have just the sticker within comes out, and the rest of the border, whether that is yellow or red, remains with the cards, so they don't get tied together. So you have those two different versions of the stickers for the teams, and then of course there's the hat. All right, but in 1982, they went back to a puzzle. They have a yellow border on them, which is what makes them really stand out. But again, the actual tiles do look different than the 79 and the 78 versions. But that would be the last year that we would really be able to talk about these stickers, because Fleer was going through a new change. In 1981, they won a lawsuit against Topps that allowed them to make cards of baseball players. Finally, they could get back into making serious cards. Now, the first release they did, interestingly, they put gum in packs because they just felt that that was the way that it would operate, which is funny when you think about where they got to, because what they got to is very logical. Because the thing is, there was a lawsuit, and then there was an appeal, and at the end of the day, should they be allowed to put gum in, or should they not? And ultimately, by the end of 1981, the decision was made that Topps would include bubble gum in their packs. Donruss would include puzzle pieces, and Fleer would have stickers. So that means that moving forward, those stickers we've been looking at would be repurposed to be regular inserts into the Major League Baseball player packs. And this, by getting rid of the stickers for the sake of stickers thing, this opened up quite a bit, because they were making stamps and they were making player sticker cards at this time, around this time. And so there was kind of a lot. And ending this phase of these particular types of stickers, that was just kind of a logical thing for them to do. And so it closes out the 1970s era of Fleer as we move into the 1980s, where now they're just one of the baseball card companies, which I'm going to look at separately. But right now, I'm going to bring this to a close, and I'm going to look forward to putting together that video coming up. Now, I've already done the early 60s cards, if you haven't seen that video, so you can definitely check that one out. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so, and well, yeah, thank you very much for watching.